Beneath the burning desert sun lies the forgotten town of Hollow Sky, a place where the light itself can't be trusted. When a meteorologist arrives to study strange atmospheric shifts, he witnesses the impossible, the sky turning black for exactly 13 minutes, swallowing the sun, the sound, and several of the townspeople. As each blackout returns, more vanish, along with fragments of memory and reality. Science falters, paranoia grows, and the truth buried in the desert begins to awaken. The darkness isn't just above them, it's inside their minds, waiting for the last light to fade. I arrived in Hollow Sky on a morning that already felt touched by something off-kilter. The desert air was dry and sharp, the sun a relentless orb burning down on cracked earth and rusted metal. As a meteorologist, I was accustomed to extreme storms, heat waves, sudden temperature drops, but nothing prepared me for what unfolded that afternoon. From the weather station perched on the outskirts of town, I scanned my instruments, the digital readouts flickering under the harsh light. The town itself was small, a scattering of sun-bleached buildings and dusty streets. Locals eyed me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I was an outsider, and they had their secrets. Just after 2 in the afternoon, the sky shifted. It was subtle at first, slight dimming of the sun's harsh glare. Then, as if a curtain had been drawn, the entire sky turned an impenetrable black. It wasn't dusk, not even a storm cloud. It was a void, swallowing the desert light whole. My breath caught. I stared up, heart pounding, as the temperature plummeted and a silence unlike any I'd known descended. I fumbled for my tablet, my fingers trembling as I began to record everything. The minute the sky darkened, the drop in temperature, the sudden cessation of bird calls and the wind's whisper. The townspeople poured out of their homes, their faces lifting toward the sky with a mix of horror and disbelief. Sheriff Lyle Carrington stood nearby, his usual stern demeanor cracked by unease. "This ain't natural," he muttered, eyes scanning the horizon. The clock on my device ticked upward. 13 minutes, exactly 13 minutes later, the blackness receded as abruptly as it had come. The sun blazed forth once more, but the warmth felt hollow, as if the world had lost something vital in the void. The town's relief was short-lived. When the residents began counting their neighbors, it became clear that some had vanished. No signs, no clues, just gone. Panic rippled through the small community. Mara Jennings, the shopkeeper, clasped my arm, eyes wide. "Where'd they go?" "I don't know," I confessed, swallowing hard. Together with Sheriff Carrington and Mara, I joined the search parties scouring the desert outskirts. We called out names into the wind, our voices hollow echoes against the barren landscape. The sunburnt earth gave up no answers. Back at the weather station, I pored over my recordings, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything to explain the impossible darkness and the missing people. The data showed no precedent, no natural phenomenon that fit this event. It was as if the sky itself had turned hostile, an omen cloaked in a cosmic enigma. That night, sleep was elusive. I lay awake, the memory of the blackened sky burned vivid behind my eyelids. What had swallowed the sun? And more importantly, what had swallowed my neighbors? The first blackout was only the beginning, but it marked the line between the world I knew and the uncharted shadows waiting beneath the hollow sky. It began with the second blackout. I had been tracking the weather patterns obsessively, hoping to find some natural explanation for the sudden, inexplicable darkness that swallowed the sky. 13 minutes on the dot, the town would be cast into an unnatural blackness, the sun itself seeming to vanish. But this time, when the light returned, the atmosphere was different, heavier, more suffocating. I stepped outside the small motel room where I had been staying and immediately sensed the change. The air felt thicker, charged with an intangible tension. I moved toward the town square, notebook clutched tightly in my hand, eyes scanning the faces around me. The usual bustle had thinned. Where yesterday a crowd had gathered, now only a handful remained. Whispers floated on the dry breeze, rumors of neighbors who hadn't come back from the darkness. Marta Ellis was sitting on the wooden steps of her diner, her brow furrowed and lips pressed tight. When I approached, she looked up, eyes shadowed with worry. "You noticed it too, huh?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. People are disappearing, more than last time. She glanced toward the cracked asphalt street, now eerily empty. This town's been quiet for years, but this is different. It's like the dark takes them, and nobody talks about it openly. Later, I found myself in the cramped confines of the diner, the air thick with the scent of coffee and stale bread. Dr. Elias Granger joined us, his expression grim. "Officially, it's nothing," he said, voice strained. "Some atmospheric anomaly. Could be a sandstorm, a solar eclipse late in the cycle. But I don't buy it. Too precise, too deliberate." I scribbled notes feverishly, but my mind was elsewhere. There was a gnawing sensation in my chest, a cold pit of doubt. The darkened sun wasn't just a weather event. It was something else, something malevolent. As the days passed, I began to notice subtle changes around me. A street sign, I was sure, read Main Street, now looked unfamiliar. Faces I had seen every morning seemed to blur at the edges. And worst of all, my own memories started to betray me. I'd open my journal to find entries I didn't recall writing, or blank pages where I expected detailed observations. One evening, I stared at a photograph of my childhood home, but the image felt like a faded echo, as if my mind was erasing it piece by piece. Each blackout deepened this distortion. The sun would darken, shadows would lengthen, and when the light returned, so did the absence of people, of memories, of certainty. The town's official narrative crumbled beneath me. I was no longer just a scientist. I was a man clinging to fragments of a reality slipping through his fingers. I spent hours walking the quiet streets, searching for answers in empty houses and whispered stories. Marta's Diner became a refuge, a place where fear was shared and not hidden. Dr. Granger's skepticism grounded me, even as his warnings grew darker. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and threatened another blackout, I found myself facing the horizon, the sky pulsing with an unnatural blackness at the edges. The townsfolk gathered silently, shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for the light. The air hummed with a strange energy, and I felt the first real pang of fear, not just for their disappearances, but for my own fading self. What was happening here? Was the darkened sun a curse, or a door to something beyond understanding? And if memories were vanishing along with the missing, what was left of me once the shadows claimed it all? As the sky finally turned black once more, my pen hovered over a blank page, the ticking seconds marking not just the passage of time, but the erasure of all I thought I knew. The 13 minutes stretched endlessly, and when the light returned, the town was smaller, quieter, and I was more alone than ever. The shadows were not just outside, they were inside me too. I had always trusted the cold logic of data, the steady pulse of numbers on my instruments, the predictable patterns of weather systems. But in hollow sky, those certainties began to unravel like sand slipping through fingers. The town's sky blackened again, and this time I was caught in its shadow. Morning stretched long and shimmering with heat as I set up my equipment outside the weather station. My portable anemometer twirled lazily in the wind, capturing each gust that swept across the barren desert plain. The sun blazed mercilessly, its light draining the color from the cracked earth beneath me. I jotted notes in my field journal, the pages fluttering in the dry breeze, each entry a lifeline tethered to understanding. The instruments hummed steadily, except for a peculiar flicker in the barometric readings and anomaly that didn't fit any known pattern. I frowned, eyes narrowing. The pressure dropped suddenly, sharply, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. A tangible tension hung in the air, thick and electric. Then, without warning, the world shifted. The sky above me darkened, swallowing the relentless sun in a choking void. It was no ordinary eclipse. This blackness was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. The desert's usual chorus, the distant call of ravens, the rustle of brittle leaves, fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath in the thickening gloom. Dizziness swept over me. The horizon wavered, a mirage twisting and bending like the desert heat had turned against me. My heart pounded in my chest, rapid and stammering, as if warning me of some unseen danger. I gripped my notebook tightly, but the words began to blur, the ink smudging before my eyes. Time fractured. The 13 minutes stretched and folded, each second echoing with a hollow emptiness. When the sky finally peeled back its black veil, the sun returned with a sudden, stabbing brightness that made me blink and shield my eyes. But something was wrong. The familiar textures of the town felt muted, as if the colors had run dry. Faces I thought I knew seemed distant, like shadows flickering on the edge of my memory. I stumbled toward the sheriff's office, where Delgado's wary eyes met mine. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough but steady. I'm not sure," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "It's like something's missing memory's faces." He nodded grimly. "You're not the only one." That afternoon, I found myself in the dusty confines of the town's small library. Mara was there, seated at a table cluttered with old maps, weather logs, and yellowed newspaper clippings. Her sharp eyes lifted from the pages as I approached. "Mara," I said, voice low, "I experienced the blackout. It's worse than I thought. I'm losing pieces of myself, memories fading like they were never real." She closed the book in front of her with a soft thud. "You're feeling the echoes," she said, a hint of sadness in her tone. "This isn't just a weather event. It's something older, something tied to the town's history, to the desert itself." Together, we pored over the records, tracing patterns and legends that spoke of a darkened sun and vanished souls. Each page deepened the mystery, but also the dread. The more I learned, the more the edges of my reality frayed. As dusk fell, I wandered the empty streets, the desert wind curling around me like a ghost's whisper. Shadows stretched long and distorted, twisting into shapes that teased the corners of my mind. I stopped before the house of a friend who hadn't returned from the last blackout. The door hung ajar, a silent invitation or a warning, I couldn't tell. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I felt the weight of absence, the growing void left by those who had vanished. My own reflection in a broken window seemed unfamiliar, a stranger staring back with haunted eyes. Night descended, and I returned to my quarters, the chill settling in my bones. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by fragments of memories slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. The blackout was no longer a mere anomaly. It was a living thing, a malevolent force erasing not just people but the very essence of their existence. And I was next. As I closed my eyes, the question gnawed relentlessly at me. How do you fight a darkness that steals your past, your identity, your very self? The answer eluded me, lost somewhere in the hollow sky. But I knew one thing: there was no turning back now. The echoes in the dust had begun, and I had to follow them to the end, no matter what memories I lost along the way. The desert did not forgive ignorance. It punished those who sought answers with silence, with absence, with the slow erosion of the soul. As I prepared for the next blackout, I calibrated my instruments with trembling hands, desperate to catch the truth before it vanished into the void. And when the darkness came again, I would be ready. Or so I hoped. The 13 minutes awaited. The third blackout had left the town even emptier than before. When the sky finally bled light back over the horizon, the streets of Hollow Sky were quieter, the absence of voices and footsteps more pronounced. I stepped outside my small rented room, the weight of the morning pressing down on me like a physical force. The sun, once a comforting constant, now seemed like a cruel reminder of what we had lost. I wandered through the town square, a place usually buzzing with the hum of early risers and the sharp clatter of the market stalls being set up. But today, dust swirled in lazy eddies across cracked pavement. Doors hung open on their hinges, empty and hollow. Abandoned cups sat on tables, their cold rings etched into the weathered wood. The silence was suffocating, an oppressive blanket that smothered hope. Inside Mara's shop, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and stale dust. The flickering light bulb overhead cast long shadows against the peeling wallpaper. Mara sat behind the counter, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "You see it too, don't you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That weight during the blackout, like something pressing down on your chest, squeezing the breath out." She shivered, glancing toward the window where the sky was a pale blue, betraying no hint of the darkness to come. I nodded slowly. "Tell me everything you remember." She took a shaky breath. "It's like the sun disappears, but it's more than that. It's like the world stops, and in that stillness, something moves in the shadows. Eyes watching, waiting. I caught glimpses, figures just out of sight, like smoke or mist, but with eyes that burned. I don't know if it's real or if we're losing our minds." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I scribbled notes frantically, trying to capture the raw terror in her voice. The official reports called it an atmospheric anomaly, but what Mara described was something else entirely. Later, I met with Deputy Harris. We stood outside, the desert stretching endlessly beneath a sky that refused to settle. Search parties combed the outskirts, their calls swallowed by the wind. Harris's face was grim, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. "Each blackout takes more," he muttered. "People vanish without a trace. No clues, no bodies, just gone." I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. "What do the others say?" "Same as you and Mara," he replied. "They feel it too, the wait, the silence, the watching. But no one dares speak openly. Fear keeps them locked inside." The wind picked up, carrying a faint, eerie whisper. I glanced up at the sky, now a cruelly bright blue, but I could almost hear the darkened sun's calm invitation to oblivion. Night fell, and I sat alone in my room, the air heavy and still. I spread my notes across the table, the scratch of my pen the only sound in the silence. The fragments of testimonies blurred together, painting a picture of something beyond science, something ancient and malevolent. But as I tried to hold on to the facts, a disturbing sensation crept in, memories slipping away. Faces of friends, details of conversations, moments from my own past, Chech fled like shadows at dawn. I gripped my head, fighting the vertigo of forgetfulness. Was the darkness reaching into my mind? Was the hollow sky erasing not just people, but their very existence? I closed my eyes, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down as heavily as the vanished sun. The third blackout had changed everything, and I feared what the next would bring. The town was unraveling, piece by piece, swallowed by a darkness that wasn't just absence of light, but the erasure of being itself. I was running out of time, and soon, I feared, there would be nothing left to remember. And then the sky began to darken again.